Rahman Rahim. Honorable Chairman from IRCICA and Awqaf, Your Excellency Ambassador Elif Çomoğlu Ülgen, Ambassador of Turkey, Your Excellency Ambassador Salman Al-Farisi, Ambassador of Indonesia, Honorable Chair of Awqaf, Mr. Haroon Kalla, my dear brother Zainul Abidin Kaje, friends of IRCICA and Awqaf, friends of IRCICA from Mozambique, Malawi, South Africa, and elsewhere across the African continent, distinguished audience and participants from all over Africa and beyond. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is my honor and pleasure to address you this morning on the occasion of this opening of a special webinar on the history of Islamic civilization in Southern Africa, which is being jointly organized by IRCICA and Awqaf. Excellencies and distinguished participants, this virtual conference is a prelude to our third International Congress on Islamic History and Civilization in this very important region of Africa, which we are going to organize in Maputo, capital of the Republic of Mozambique, in 2021, God willing. Distinguished participants, since its establishment 4 decades ago, IRCICA has succeeded in establishing an excellent working relationship with all OIC member states in Africa and Muslim communities in non-member states, and has been working very closely with ministers of foreign affairs, culture, higher education and universities, academic and research institutions, and Islamic organizations in those countries across the continent to implement its research projects and congresses concerning Islamic history, art, and culture. IRCICA's academic and intellectual engagement with Africa started way back in 1986, when the center published a PhD thesis by a Senegalese scholar, Dr. Mamadou Ndiaye, on Arab Islamic education in Senegal. Since the mid-1980s till today, the center has continued to engage African scholars and academics. It published the book on Madrasas of Mali by a Turkish scholar, Professor Dr. Ahmed Kavaz, in 2003. He is now Ambassador of Turkey in Senegal, in Dakar. The center conducted several congresses, seminars, and workshops, and published their proceedings on Islamic civilization in all the 4 regions of West, East, Central, and Southern Africa. A total 9 congresses, workshops have so far taken place in Africa across the 4 regions referred to above. 4 of those conferences were convened in West Africa, in Dakar, Senegal, hosting 2 of them, in 1996 and 2014, in collaboration with the government of Senegal and the University of Sheikh Anta Diop. In October 2018, another congress was held in Abuja, Nigeria, in which IRCICA collaborated with the government of Nigeria and Arawa House of Ahmadu Bello University in Kaduna. The 4th Congress was convened in March 2019 in Niamey, Niger, in collaboration with the Institute for Research in Human Sciences of Abdul Mumin University of Niger. Likewise, there are concrete plans to work with the government of Senegal to jointly organize an international conference on Awqaf in West Africa in 2021. On the other hand, IRCICA is closely working with Arewa House of Ahmadu Bello University of Nigeria in Kaduna to jointly organize another international conference in 2021 on the role and contribution of Hajj to strengthening commercial and cultural relations between Hijaz and Middle East and Biladus Sudan. Furthermore, preliminary works has just started for IRCICA to convene a major international conference on the history and cultural impact of colonialism in Africa in early 2022, inshallah. As for Eastern Africa, the first Congress on Islamic Civilization in Eastern Africa was organized by the Center jointly with the Islamic University in Uganda in December 2003 in Kampala. In 2013, the Center, in collaboration with the National Records and Archives Authority of Oman and the State University of Zanzibar, convened the second Congress for the region on the same topic. Regarding the Central African region, in December 2019, IRCICA, in collaboration with the government of the Republic of Chad and King Faisal University of Chad, organized its first Congress on Islamic Civilization in Central Africa. However, plans are in their advanced stages to organize an international conference on Islamic civilization in South Central Africa and the Gulf of Guinea next year, inshallah. As for the Southern Africa, it has so far hosted 2 of IRCICA's international congresses, and this webinar is a prelude to the region's 3rd Congress to be convened in Maputo, Mozambique in 2021. In September 2006, and in collaboration with National Awqaf Foundation of South Africa and the University of Johannesburg, IRCICA organized an international symposium on Islamic civilization in Southern Africa in Johannesburg. Similarly, in March 2016, the Center, in collaboration with Awqaf and the University of KwaZulu-Natal and International Peace College of South Africa, organized the region's 2nd Congress on Islamic Civilization in Southern Africa in Durban. Most of the proceedings of all these conferences have been published by IRCICA, while the few remaining will soon be published, inshallah. Along with this series of academic congresses, IRCICA's activities concerning Africa also include various other programs and project areas. One of these programs activities is the preservation of cultural heritage of the Muslim world. Over the past 40 years, and on numerous occasions, IRCICA has provided many series of training courses on library and archive management and preservation to libraries and archive staff from different African countries. The areas of focus during these training courses included not only books and library management in general, but also restoration and conservation of old books and manuscripts. Currently, IRCICA is jointly working with the government of Mali on a long-term preservation project for the Timbuktu manuscripts. Following the agreement for cultural cooperation signed between IRCICA and the Ministry of Culture of Mali in 2016, IRCICA is contributing to the digitization and the storage of the Timbuktu manuscripts. Another field of activity we are engaging with Africa is our project on arts and calligraphy promotion in the Muslim world. The 11th round of the international calligraphy competitions that we have been organizing for more than 30 years now, since 1986, have always received participants from African countries, and the Center will continue to encourage and promote African participants in this program as well. It is also worthy of mentioning at this junction that for 2 years now, IRCICA is directing a regional calligraphy center which runs regular training courses at Kaduna, Nigeria, jointly with Ahmadu Bello University. Distinguished chairs and respected participants, this brief account of some of IRCICA's activities in Africa clearly shows that the Center's long-standing relationship with the member states, institutions, organizations, and Muslim communities along the 4 regions of the continent continue to grow from strength to strength, and that our long African journey has been and will continue to be smooth and productive, inshallah. In conclusion, distinguished participants, and our honorable chairs, I wish to seize this opportunity to sincerely thank the National Awqaf Foundation of South Africa for their relentless efforts to support and partner with IRCICA in all its activities in the Southern African region and beyond. In the same way, I take this opportunity to sincerely thank the government and people of Mozambique for agreeing to host the forthcoming Third International Congress on Islamic Civilization in Southern Africa in Maputo next year. I would also like to thank IRCICA's partners and coordinators from the King Faisal University of Chad, Areva House of Ahmadu Bello University of Nigeria, and Institute for Research in Human Sciences of the Abdul Mumini University of Niger. I thank the Excellencies, the ambassadors, Ambassador of Turkey and Ambassador of Indonesia for honoring this meeting. Lastly, and not least, I wish to sincerely thank distinguished participants, audiences in this webinar.
Assalamu alaikum to everybody, to all dear friends whom I had missed due to Corona. But if I have to do it protocol-wise, dear Halit, Eren, it has been ages I hadn't seen you. I hadn't had the opportunity to host you in this beautiful country, South Africa. So I understand I'm missing you again, as the next meeting will be held in the beautiful country of Mozambique. But you always have a house here, not necessarily the Turkish embassy, but I know your friends, your brothers are very much waiting you, hoping to embrace you back in South Africa. Of course, I wholeheartedly thank Awqaf South Africa. Awqaf South Africa has been actually my closest ally since I arrived in this beautiful land. Thank you very much, dear brothers. Thank you, dear Haroon, Zaino, Mickaeel. You, as always, make my day. And I'm grateful to have the chance to address you from this beautiful city of Plettenberg this morning. To all other friends, to all valuable academics, and to my dear, of course, colleague and neighbor Salman, my deepest regards. I just would like to stop here, but otherwise I will continue with all these affectionate words. It's really been a while and we all have missed each other. This is a great opportunity given to the Turkish ambassador today. Indeed, I would also like to very briefly touch upon maybe the Turkish impact on the Islamic civilization that has spread as far as these corners of the African continent. And well, luckily and gratefully, the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, had its share in that, as I believe many of those speakers in this webinar know better than I do. But it was, we at least see it institutionally in the year 862, when the then Khalifa of all Muslims, the Sultan of the Ottomans, Abdul Aziz Khan, upon the request of the then British Queen, decided to send the religious scholar Aboubacar Effendi to Cape Town. And indeed, it was really a beginning of an important heritage, which even today continues strongly connecting the Turks to the Muslims of this beautiful country. And every other day, I'm also happy to note that this bond grows. A very recent decision of the Turkish government to grant citizenship to the ancestors coming from Aboubacar Effendi's family has been a very strong and further step to this direction. And me, myself, every time I visit the Muslim communities, but also the Islamic heritage in this country, I see the very strong bonds that still remain in our daily rituals, in the jewel mosques, that some of them had been also built by the help of the then Ottoman sultans. And also, of course, I was very much impressed by an important piece of academic work that I read from dear Honorable Süleyman Dangor, and I think he is with us here today. And that piece was about, in general, the Islamic heritage in South Africa, but also the Turkish impact, starting with Aboubacar Effendi, but also which has continued during the Turkish national struggle which coincided with the end of the First World War, when the Muslims of this beautiful part of the continent, the southern African part, had contributed to the Turkish national struggle against imperialism, had sent financial aid, funds, jewelry to Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and to the Turkish people. We are able to track the records, the archives of these days, both in the South African archives, but also in the Ottoman archives, which are very alive even today. And it really just gives me excitement, enthusiasm, and pleasure to learn more about this. It has only been quite recently in the Turkish academic world that more and more academics, intellectuals, media is interested in tracing these connections with the heritage that we have left in these parts of the world. I greet you. I send from the bottom of my heart all the salams, and I wish a wonderful webinar to remain as a strong adherence, as a strong record for our commitment on the Turkish side still to advance this common heritage of Islamic civilizations in these parts of the world. Have a good day, and hope to see you soon face to face over a cup of Turkish tea or coffee. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. This is indeed a very great pleasure for me to be part of this webinar. I would like to express our warm welcome for the organizing of this webinar as a prelude to the 3rd International Congress on Islamic Civilization in Southern Africa, to be held, inshallah, in Maputo sometime next year. In this regard, I would also like to extend our congratulations to OIC Research Center for Islamic History, Art and Culture, and indeed National Awqaf Foundation of South Africa for hosting this webinar. Let me also to address to some professor here, and then indeed to my colleague Elif, and thank you very much also for your remark on how Turkey have a very good part in promoting the Islamic history in South Africa. The topic of this webinar indeed very contextual from time to time. The spread of Islam in the Southern Africa is, I think, because of the growing acceptability by wider communities on Islam as a non-oppressive religion with clear statement of on values of equality, emancipation, and liberation to all human beings that could be adopted as an ideology with the potential to resist colonial and apartheid regime at that time. Our challenge today is on how to translate those values in the 21st century in context in the addressing problem encountered by Ummah, such as poverty, alleviation, and backwardness. That's why I would like to hear more from this webinar that I believe there will be some valuable contribution from many distinguished panel in this webinar. And hopefully in the next Congress, there will be some Indonesian scholars also to take part actively. I think that's all in this point. I will stop my remark and enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much indeed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning to all of you from IRCICA. Haroon Kalla, that's the CEO of Awqaf, sir. So, Mr. Kalla, you are most welcome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's indeed a pleasure and honor for us to be here on this very important occasion of this excellent seminar on history and civilization in Southern Africa. We obviously firstly want to express our thanks to IRCICA for actually being the initiator of this conference and bringing to life the future of Southern Africa. But I want to firstly just acknowledge our dear brother and friend, Professor Halit Eren. Once again, after so many years, and I know we haven't been able to meet recently because of Corona has also made it even difficult. We were planning to come to Turkey in April to visit you and all our brothers and friends in Turkey, and of course, just enjoying the beautiful atmosphere in Turkey and enjoying the history and civilization so deep. And that kind of, for me, serves as an inspiration, and I'm sure for lots of South Africans that travel and love Turkey, and I'm sure our ambassador will testify to it, that we love Turkey, not only that, but we have so many, since she has come, that so many visitors are now actually going to Turkey. I also want to recognize our dear brother, Professor Aboubacar Abdullah Senghore, who's the Deputy Director General of IRCICA, to say thank you for being and joining us and encouraging us with those beautiful words that you shared with us as well. And of course, our Ambassador Alif Komoglu, I'm afraid Dr. Halit Eren, she and her family now have become so much part of South Africa. We would just like you to request the President Erdogan for keep her here for many terms, inshallah, because she's become part of our fabric of South African society. She really inspires our community to do lots of community work. And of course, I also want to recognize our Ambassador Salman of Farisi, who's joined us here today. We really are touched by your presence and taking your time out to be with us today. Let's acknowledge our CEO, Zainul Kaji, and our Deputy CEO, Mickaeel Collier, our panelists, Yusuf, Patel, Dr. Shuaib, Mzoma from Malawi, Shiraz, Calu, and Nabeelah Mussa from Mozambique, and Ebrahim Patel, Shafiq Morton, Professor Solomon Dango, and Professor Shaida Kassam, who are going to be leading the discussion on the way forward. So from my side, I just want to add to some of the very great wisdom that our Professor Aboubacar has shared with us, and of course, our dear brother Halit Eren, with regards to the history of some of the conferences we've had here. Now, you know, I was reflecting on this idea of history and civilization. And the one civilization that comes to my mind, and I know people call it an empire, the Ottoman Empire, but really, for me, the more we get to know about, you know, the so-called Ottoman Empire, we realize that it wasn't an Ottoman Empire. It was an Ottoman Islamic civilization. It was representing Islam in its truest form, the mercy and the overarching embracing of the non-Muslim communities within that geographical Islamic civilization. And that, I think, is what is the cornerstone of a good civilization that embraces all communities. When we talk about civilizations, and the many conferences that our Professor Halit Eren alluded to, in particular Nigeria, you know, we have a lot to learn, not just from the Ottoman Islamic civilization, but also from the civilization and the Hausa states that our very great, legendary Osman Dan Fodio brought together in Nigeria as a great example of an African Islamic civilization that was born, and not enough is known about these beautiful civilizations that occurred across Africa. And we know about the history of Senegal and all the brilliant 500,000 manuscripts that are sitting there of knowledge, of philosophy, of mathematics, to the extent that our ex-president, former president Thabo Mbeki, has set up, and we as the community of South Africa have paid towards a museum that will house all these beautiful manuscripts. And I think when we talk about history and civilization, two things come to mind. One is that we have to recognize that the best way to learn is to glean from our wisdom of the past, to embrace it, but also to take that wisdom and translate it into what is required today. And I'm hoping that this seminar would be able to allow us to do that in the way forward discussion. What do we need to do as a Southern African Muslim community to transform our community in South Africa, to become an example to the larger community in South Africa, to understand that Islam does offer solutions that can transform countries. When we look at Africa, I'm proud to say, Alhamdulillah, we are more than 1 billion inhabitants of Africa. And Africa is basically an Islamic continent. It has the Muslim presence here. It's way over 65 to 70% of the community. And that's why it's so important for us as a Southern African part of this continent to be able to follow our neighbors throughout the rest of Africa and share the wisdom of Islam and the transformational knowledge and the transformational abilities that Islam has that can impact the rest of Southern Africa. And when you talk about civilization, I'm hoping today that we cover 3 or 4 issues. And one is the infrastructure requirements that the future Muslim community will require, but also Islam can grow leaps and bounds within the next 30 years in South Africa or Southern Africa. It's already in Mozambique. It's growing in many parts of Southern Africa. But for that to happen, there are certain infrastructure requirements. One of them would be building many mosques. There are demand. I was just looking at a post the other day on our South African Islamic Relief Group. There's huge demand for mosques, for example, in the Eastern Cape. Islam is spreading very rapidly in those areas. We've seen during this COVID period, the Muslims, the Muslim community of South Africa has reached out far and wide, right across South Africa. In fact, if I may dare say, the Muslims of South Africa have become a great example of a minority community who are able to assist its neighbors in pulling through times that are difficult. We have spent something like almost 150 million rand as a community, and we're not, hundreds of thousands have given 5 rand, 10 rand, 50 rand, 100 rand, and so on to make that happen. We've shared with our neighbors, in some neighborhoods, 11,000 inhabitants, for example, hardly less than a kilometer away from us. And they come from something like 15 or 16 different African countries there. They have not come there just as laborers, but they've come as refugees, economic refugees. So this has impacted the mindset of not only our government, but other communities that have seen us as a shining example of what can be done if a small group of people are able to organize themselves in such a way that we're able to help our neighbors to relieve the hardships that have faced Southern Africa during this very difficult COVID period. And we know, of course, the hardships are international, but we're just sharing with you our experience. So the potential is very big in Southern Africa to make an impact. But just to, conclude in the next 2 minutes with regard to some of the suggestions we have, is besides the mosques, I think the leadership that we're seeing in many parts of the Muslim world, for example, the leadership that we're seeing from Turkey that's coming through is inspiring us to take the next step forward. What we lack here, and what we found that when we visited Turkey on previous occasions, they have many, thousands of Islamic leadership schools. We require, if we want to change and transform the civilization of Southern Africa, we require a huge infrastructure investment in educational, transformational facilities, but in particular, leadership transformation. If we can have those thousands of students coming out and going throughout the Muslim community and the broader community of South Africa and Southern Africa, and they can enrich the infrastructure, civil society, and our municipalities, because they are in dire need of good manpower. So we're looking forward to creating a partnership with IRCICA and of course the Muslim world to see how we can transform South Africa to become the engine for transformation in the rest of Southern Africa. Now we know that we're a small community, but alhamdulillah, we're very blessed. As our ambassador said, we've got a very rich history of Islam in South Africa. And sometimes when you plant a tree, they say when you plant a Chinese-born the bamboo tree, it takes you 10 years to get to 1 meter, 9 years to get to 1 meter height. But then the next 1 year, it grows 9 meters. We believe that we are a bamboo tree in South Africa, small Muslim community in Southern Africa that are 1 meter tall. With a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of push, we believe we can grow leaps and bounds in the next 25 to 30 years. And finally, I'd like to just share, every organization, every society is driven by a few things. And the one thing that we need, the foundation, is an Islamic Research Institute, but not for Muslims, for the community of Southern Africa, to see what are the requirements and what infrastructure is required so that can be tailor-made to transform the community. And finally, let me conclude. When somebody told me in England, we were talking about dawah, and Dr. Kaleem said this to me he said, Haroon, do you know what dawah means? Dr. Kaleem was, as you know, the leader of the Muslim parliament in the UK. He said dawah means becoming a great example. Dawah means invitation. Invitation means that come to my home. And if somebody comes to the home of Islam, if you don't have an organized community that becomes like an invitation so somebody comes to the home of Islam. And the home of Islam can only happen if we as Muslim community become self-reliant, become great example, and become transformers and givers to the broader community of South Africa. So inshallah, we hope that this seminar and this partnership will put down the next 25-year plan for us, and that will become the beacon of light for Southern Africa. Whether the organization is set up in Mozambique, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and any Southern African, it's not important. The important thing is that we plant these seeds. From my side, I just want to thank everybody who mentioned before, in particular, Professor Halit, Eren, and Professor Aboubacar, and of course, Ambassador Alif, and our dear ambassador from Indonesia, Salman Al-Firisi, Jazakallah. Allah bless you all. And we look forward to a great seminar. And Jazakallah, keep us in your dua. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Brother Haroon, for your elaborate speech. I just want to throw light on 3 areas that you highlighted, and I agree with you. I agree with you very well. One is the misleading terminology of empire used with reference to the Ottoman Caliphate. In all the international conferences, seminars, programs that I attend, anytime the word Ottoman Empire is used, I objected openly that it's not empire. That term doesn't exist in Islamic, in our sources, neither in the historical nor in the political sources. This was Khilafah, extended from Medina to Damascus to Baghdad, then finally to Istanbul. And it lasted for not less than 6 centuries of uninterrupted Islamic rule. So I think we should work very hard to clear our historical sources and remove the terms that need to be removed, include this one, Ottoman Empire. It was not an empire. It was not the colonization. It was unfortunate that some of even the Muslims in the Arab countries and beyond, they use imperialism or colonization with reference to the Ottoman rule. The other thing is Africa being the home for Islam. Islam has been in Africa for centuries before any other religion. The competing religions now with Islam, they came to Africa after Islam was there for 6 to 5 centuries. So definitely Islam is home for Africa. And thirdly, and because of this, I think we still need to do a lot to spread Islam among the Muslim communities in the Southern Africa region, particularly the indigenous. There's a lot of work that we need to do more, but we trust that the Muslim communities in Southern Africa, particularly organizations and institutions like Awqaf, they're doing their best and they continue to do their utmost best to make sure that Islam goes through and spread all over that part of the Africa region, the way it is in the north, in the northern, western, and central part of the continent. So thank you very much for that elaborate speech. And we also grateful to the ambassadors of Turkey, Her Excellency Ambassador Elif and His Excellency Salman, and also we're expecting to have the ambassador of the Sultanate of Oman, for due to reasons being beyond his control, he could not be with us, but he sent his good wishes. We very, very grateful to him. And now we hand over to the task to my co-presenter or moderator, Mickaeel, in the other part of the continent or the other part of the Islamic world, to let the speeches of researchers flow. And thank you very much. This marks the end of the opening session. And we're now moving to the webinar proper. Mickaeel.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Professor Senghore, for moderating the opening session of this very important program and discussion topic. When we start talking about Islamic civilization, it starts to get all of us excited, and there's so much to share. And I think that is why we have run slightly over time, and we thank you for your indulgence in that regard. Islam as a religion and as a group of cultures has had a major influence in Africa since its introduction in the region. More than 60% of Africa are Muslims, and numerous Muslim cultures and arts have flourished in North, West, and East Africa. In some parts of Africa, Islam thrived, although under difficult circumstances, under slavery, colonization, etc. And the important positive geopolitical changes have taken place in the region in the last 25 to 35 years that are likely to impact greatly on the future of these communities. Today's program serves as a prelude to the bigger conference that is scheduled to take place in Mozambique, inshallah, in the early parts of 2021. And the next part of our program will consist of 3 presentations on Islamic civilization in Southern Africa, its impacts on the community, and its current relevance to the society at large. Our first speaker is from South Africa, Brother Yusuf Patel. He is a professional development planner with extensive experience in integrated urban and regional development in both the public and private sectors. He qualified with a master's degree in financial economics from the University of London, a master's degree in development planning, and a bachelor's degree in quantity surveying from the University of Witwatersrand. He has served as leaders in a leadership role in various capacities, and he was the former Director General of the South African government in the Department of Cooperative Governance. He has a deep understanding of South Africa, its people, its development dynamics, and global development challenges that he's passionate about building a free, democratic, spatially transformed, and prosperous country. The Q&A session will then be held after the three presentations, and you would have an opportunity to engage with the various presentations that have taken place. So without much further ado, let us listen to the presentation of Brother Yusuf Patel. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to be part of this important webinar. Thanks to IRCICA and Awqaf for arranging it. I'm going to be talking about the Muslim community in South Africa and focusing on political and economic directions. I think the presentation just covers four broad areas. I'll just look at the Muslim community, an overview of the Muslim community, a political and economic analysis, and then some of the future directions, and then the last part is just identifying certain further areas of research. Just quickly, I mean, Islam has been consolidated in South Africa over these three broad periods, and each period has had a different level of characterization. Initially with the colonial era, it was really the foundational elements of Islam, and then moving towards resistance, many Muslim communities involved in the resistance during the apartheid period, and then democracy has obviously seen growth within the Muslim community, but also a lot of diversity as well as fragmentation. In the current reality in South Africa, the country is being pulled in almost two different directions. The constitution with all its principles on human rights, harmony, dignity, etc. But in a large part, if you look at from an implementation point of view, a lot of things are going in the opposite direction, and the Muslim community, in one way or the other, fits within these kind of tensions in terms of how the country has been pulled in these different directions. Just briefly, the population, Muslim community makes up 1.6% of the South African population. It has grown significantly over the last 20 years. It's almost a growth of 40%. And then in different provinces, that proportion of the population is different, quite significant in the Western Cape. And then if you look at within the city of Johannesburg, for example, there's a high concentration of Muslims as well. They make up 4% of the city's population. I think the Muslim community has been acknowledged in South Africa, although a small portion of the population, but the economic contribution is quite significant. This quote is from our President Cyril Ramaphosa when he just took office and was engaging with the Muslim community, recognizing that almost 10% of the economy, Muslims contribute about 10% to the economy. So it is a growing community, but still a small fraction of the overall South African population, but yet quite significant in terms of political as well as economic influence. The Muslim community is also very diverse in terms of geographic spread, race, schools of thought, outlook, as well as political stance. And if you, just by way of example, if you look at Johannesburg is a sort of almost like a microcosm of the Muslim community in the country. You can look at the breakdown in terms of diversity, in terms of race, different languages being spoken. Also, in terms of people living in Gauteng, so 62% of people currently of Muslims were actually born in Gauteng, and there's quite a significant migration from other provinces in the country, as well as significant in terms of 20% of the Muslim population is actually have migrated into the country recently. And you can look at the breakdown in terms of the different countries that people are coming from. So, I think just in terms of the SWOT analysis that was done, and, thanks to Awqaf as well, it facilitated some of the focus group discussions where we invited a number of different individuals from different backgrounds to make inputs, and some of this has been summarized. So from a political point of view, a number of strengths and weaknesses. I mean, the Muslim community has got, good liberation credentials. There's an environment where there's freedom to practice and promote Islam. Some of the weaknesses relate to, the community not being active enough on societal issues, and also lack of lobbying and policy engagement. In terms of some of the opportunities, I think there's, incredible charity work being done in the Muslim community, but there's an opportunity to translate this into, more developmental work and into more sustainable development opportunities. And then there's a changing demographic of the community, and this brings about a dynamism, which is an opportunity for Islam to really flourish in a very kind of diverse and dynamic way. Some of the threats, again, number of threats, but I think important ones to point out that, young Muslims, if they're not going to be participating enough in the political sphere, this could lead to marginalization of the community in the future. I think also a lack of decolonization and forging a collective future together with all South Africans. If I think we don't focus on that, this could also threaten the scope and role of Muslim community in South Africa going forward. In terms of the economic strengths, Muslims make up, as mentioned, a significant portion of the economy. There's many traders and good trading experience and skills, and a lot of this can be, brought about and utilized in the country more effectively. And then I think, some of the weaknesses, obviously inadequate promotion and empowerment of Black Muslims in the country. There's a need to solve day-to-day problems of Muslims. There's a limitation in the size of Muslim businesses, and I think, there's really opportunity for Muslim businesses to grow and expand, but the current models are not enabling that. And there is also, more recently, levels of loss of ethics and values amongst Muslim businesses and Muslim individuals. Opportunities in terms of the economy, I think the Awqaf type businesses and looking at how these models can be, expanded. Looking at leadership forums where there can be opportunities for, mentorship, intergenerational growth. Also utilizing the professionals in the country and making sure that professionals can actually start assisting and supporting with actual delivery, design and delivery of different programs in the country. And I think, Muslims can also lead in terms of business morality, ethics, and trustworthiness. Some other further opportunities around the leveraging of the Awqaf models, but also the free trade areas and the SADC areas, and looking at growing growing business and linkages and networks within the SADC level as well as the continental level. And then also, how can traders upskill and expand partnerships and share knowledge and experiences more, and also look at different communities in South Africa and how some of their experiences can be broadened and shared across South African society. Some important threats. I think there is a threat of reputational risk. If we find that there are Muslim businesses, individuals been involved in scandals, and then I think also if there's a kind of narrow Muslim-only approach being taken, it could undermine the role of Muslims in the country going forward. We also engaged, with a number of inputs also from a business perspective. People have shared, for example, the Minara Chamber of Commerce. And I think one of the important points coming out there is that there's this opportunity to unlock the cumulative wealth of the community to create the next generation of businesses and leaders. And that's an important point to look at. So based on that, almost like a SWOT analysis of the political and economic situation, I'd like to just maybe in the next few minutes just focus on what are the implications of all of this and what would it mean for future directions. And this is really about saying that, there is this opportunity for a flourishing civilization, Islamic civilization moving forward in South Africa. But it does mean that Muslims have to be relevant to society and have to contribute to transformative solutions. So, there's a number of constraints which will need to be overcome. For example, the need to study, share, and apply sacred texts and teachings in a much more contemporary context and in a much, in a much more contextualized way, but also utilizing objectives of Sharia to address critical issues facing South African society, like inequality, human rights promotion, and the findings, socioeconomic solutions. It will also require, I think, embracing a more multi and interdisciplinary approach. We're looking at, better working together between religious scholars, scientists, professionals, and practitioners, and embracing and taking on an Islamic secular approach. Also undertaking and applying critical research and critical thinking and methods. So there has to be more, more rigor in this respect to just begin to elevate the ability of Muslims to translate, important resources and religious resources, but really translate it into societal kind of effectiveness. And then energizing Muslims, especially youth, and harnessing the potential of youth is going to be critical. It's also going to be necessary to ensure a humanity perspective beyond a narrow Muslim interest perspective, and also taking an approach of working collectively with South African society, so that look at an approach of how everyone can live together for the future of all South Africans. It's also going to need, I think, a vision, and the community having a much clearer vision with long-term goals and outcomes, having a clearer future perspective of education and leadership, dealing with the issue of decolonization, but dealing with it with a future-based vision. And this is going to be important because I think, the influence of colonization, apartheid, and the legacy and impact of it is still very prevalent, in society today. And a lot of the current challenges that we're facing, including, even issues around Muslim identity, South African identity, African consciousness, all of those issues really need much more unpacking, and they need to be kind of reimagine into a future and a kind of transformative and visionary future. It also means reimagining past Islamic glories and systems and beginning to, reimagine these as well into new contemporary models. And I think we can't, stick to kind of old models. The principles in some of the models obviously remain relevant, but how they then get applied within the new context, within changing context, and within a future imaginary, I think becomes quite critical. And then, this sort of visioning can also help different community organizations and Muslim organizations to become clearer as well about what they really want and what they really want to achieve and need to achieve. It also means embracing diversity within the Muslim community, so that vision has to be, a collective, inclusive vision. But it's also about promoting cultural expression, protecting and growing the South African Islamic heritage, attracting and nurturing youth. And then importantly, looking at, the regional, the SADC, continental, and global relations and engagement, and beginning to build a vision for that, for the society at those kind of scales, and the linkages between Muslim South African society and with the fellow Muslim communities across SADC as well as across the continent. Future directions in relation to being more organized, and it's going to be critical that there's a focus on leadership structure, which has to be multidisciplinary. There has to be a look at systems and structures to deliberately grow and flourish as a community, and to also grow the Islamic heritage, as well as the Islamic ethos and principles. Resource mobilization is going to be quite critical. We need to become much more focused and diligent around this. I mentioned the issue around focus on youth development and building future leaders, networking and collaboration, leaderships and skills and talent management. This has to all be done in a much more kind of planned and deliberate way. And we need to begin to put together and knit together, the institutional systems and mechanisms to focus on these issues, including, deployment strategies, so that we enabling and ensuring that, that Muslim resources are active within all different elements of South African society and communities. So just the last part then, in conclusion, is there's a number of, based on these future directions, as well as some of the SWOT analysis, I think there's a number of future potential areas of research, which will be quite interesting. I think understanding the makeup of the Muslim community more, would be quite critical, but also beginning to get and understand the views on the ground. What are the issues on the ground, views and perspectives from Muslims on the ground, beyond kind of looking at it through the lenses of organizations and institutions and mosques, etc., but really on the ground and engaging Muslims at an individual level, and beginning to understand what are some of the dynamics emerging. I think political involvement, understanding the historical, present, and future role, and doing much more research around this, as well as more research on political models. So there's a lot of debates and discussions around, do Muslims form their own political parties? Do you join existing parties? There's a range of kind of conundrums around all of these different issues. Do Muslims, get more involved in strengthening civil society, in strengthening their lobbying capability and role, or is it, a bit of all of these things? And then in terms of contribution to the economy and looking at different case studies, whether it's, profiling different leaders and Muslim leaders, businesses, different places across the country that have, done important, kind of work, and where there's lessons that can be learned and shared. And then obviously the Awqaf and other models, and how these could be maybe applied at a wider scale, and become kind of more mainstreamed within South African kind of policy and implementation. Then community development and relief work, looking at maybe case studies on that, and also looking at all the incredible work being done, but some of the lessons and how this could evolve into more sustainable models. And then Muslim community leadership and organization models. I think that will be important, to look at from a leadership perspective going forward. And then finally, I think research around the Southern African Muslims in the Southern African context, and issues around networks and collaborations, and research that can actually underpin some of this going forward. So that's basically it. I hope I've covered things, and it's been of interest, and we'll be able to maybe take some questions, and look forward to furthering the work in this area and discussing it further. So thank you very much for that, and shukran.
Thank you very much, Brother Yusuf Patel, for that very in-depth analysis of Islam in South Africa. Moving swiftly on to our next presenter, Shuaib Mzoma hails from Malawi and holds an undergraduate degree from the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia, an MA in linguistics from the University of South Africa, and a PhD in African languages from the University of Johannesburg. Brother Shuaib has served in many positions in both Malawi and across the Southern African region. So we now hand over to Brother Shuaib Mzoma for his presentation.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillahi wa ba'd. The moderator, Professor Aboubacar Abdullah, the organizers from both Awqaf South Africa and the IRCICA, Teke, my fellow panelists, and the participants who are with us today. May I take this opportunity to thank the organizers for including me into this program. My name is Shuaib Mzoma from Malawi, and I'll be presenting on a topic, Islamic Civilization in Malawi. To begin with, perhaps you may wish to know that Malawi lies in the southeast of Africa. It is a landlocked country with an area covering 118,000 square kilometers. It is a country which was formerly known as Nyasaland under the British rule. Coming to the core area of my paper, I'll begin by outlining how Islam came into the country. Islam reached Malawi in three phases. Firstly, the southeastern phase, but also the north and the south phase. Others prefer calling these phases as the three entries of Islam into Malawi, simply because of their different geographical places through which Islam entered the country. The first phase involves, that is the southeastern phase, involves the Yao tribe. In fact, the Yaos were the agent or the primal agent or carriers of Islam, the people who brought Islam into Malawi when they migrated from Mozambique in early 1830s. Being the business people, the Yaos had already developed business contacts with their fellow businessmen from the east coast of Mozambique, that is the Arabs and the Swahili. So by the time they entered Malawi, they were already Muslims, and they settled in the eastern part of the country, in the areas such as Mangochi, Makanjira, the eastern part of the country. So when we talk of the first phase of Islam, the Yaos played a very important role in bringing Islam into the country. The northern phase, Islam entered Malawi from the north, in fact from Ujiji, that is Tanzania, through a businessman called Salim bin Abdullah, who descended from the north coming to settle at the central region, particularly the district called today called Nkhotakota. This man, an Arab Swahili, he came to settle in Nkhotakota. In fact, he came with his family, but also the friends, and settled at this area. And he established a dynasty, a role there, and he ruled the area for many generations in Nkhotakota. That is in 1840s. And through him, alhamdulillah, Islam came into Malawi, particularly at that area, Nkhotakota. The third phase is that of the South faith, whereby Islam is believed to have been brought through the Arabs who settled in the Zambezi, the Shire Valley and the Zambezi area. But this phase had no big impact of Islam in the country, simply because the Arabs did not stay long in that area, in the Zambezi area, because of the coming of the Portuguese who deported the Arabs out of the area. So these are the three phases of Islam into the country. I must also point out that the spread of Islam at its early beginnings, Islam spread through individual efforts, because at that time there were no formal organizations in the country. And the beginning of Islamic organization in the country can be traced to late Sheikh Bunaya Amasi, a graduate from a Malawian graduate who studied in Tanzania, particularly in Zanzibar. So when he finished his studies, returned to Malawi, he was the first one to establish an association which he called Kanyenda Muslim Association. So that was the beginning of Islamic organization into the country. And after him, now it was MAM came into being in 1947, borrowing a leaf from Bunaya Amasi. They called the organization Muslim Association of Malawi. And that was in 1947. And the major objective for MAM was to provide education and facilitate also the scholarships to the Muslim community. So it took almost 11 years after establishment of MAM before any other organization could be established. And after MAM, of course, there were so many organizations came into being, like Africa Muslim Agency, currently called Direct Aid. This AMA was established in the country in 1982. In fact, in its early stages, it used to work with MAM. It collaborated its project with MAM and used to work hand in hand with MAM. And the first director that time was Sheikh Saad Al-Talib. And then after AMA, there were so many organizations that came into being. But perhaps I should just summarize to say most of these organizations focus on education and construction of the masajid and the boreholes. An organization that is slightly does a different project from many organizations in the country is that of My Aisha Trust, because this one focuses, despite its focus on the education and facilitation of what you call clean water, it does also programs in HIV and AIDS, but also it gives out soft loans to the women, and it also runs orphanage centers. One of the most important strengths I can mention about the Malawian Muslim is that they have managed to maintain firm to their deen over the years, despite the challenges which they used to face in the country. Most importantly, I would mention that our early Muslims denied themselves their right to education simply because they wanted to safeguard the deen. Because in those early times, that is during the colonial era, Muslim learners were forced to adopt and adapt the values of the Christian in their schools, simply because most of the schools in the country were run and dominated by the Catholic and other church-based organizations. So upon seeing this, the early Muslims decided not to go to school, not because they did not like to be educated. They wanted to be educated themselves, but simply because they saw a threat whereby they were losing most of their kids into the Christianity and chose not to go to school. So this is one of the important strengths of the Muslims in the country. But also with regard to different organizations that exist today, a strength in the country that there is a warm kind of relationship between different organizations in the country. Yes, there could be minor differences, but not serious to impact negatively on the situation or condition of the Muslims in the country. But also another strength of the Malawian people has to do with their positive attitudes towards the leadership, Islamic leadership, but also towards the Islamic work, and also they adopt, they have a sense of volunteerism in them, to the extent that you could see Muslims in the villages helping in molding the bricks for the construction of the masajid, but also even schools in the country. So these are some of the positive or some of the strength of the Muslims in the countries. Opportunities, alhamdulillah, Muslims in the country have enjoy quite a number of the opportunities, and the most importantly is a political will, because government, in different regimes, they have been willing to work with different faith-based organizations that include the Muslims in the country. So that will is there. And also, they enjoy an enabling environment. You know, Malawi is known as a warm heart of Africa. It is a peaceful country. It has never experienced war. There are always different peoples with different faith live in harmony. So that is also an important factor and an important opportunity which the Muslims in the country also could take advantage of. Another important opportunity, what I would call an emerging opportunity, is that of the political strength which lately the Malawian Muslims seem to be gaining. That is to say, the Malawian community, the Muslim community in the country, lately are being recognized as an important voting bloc. This was not the condition in the past, whereby we were being marginalized, and the country or people of the different faith did not attach any importance today. But today, anyone aspiring for presidency in the country, there is no way he or she can ignore the importance of the Malawian Muslims, because they constitute an important bloc in as far as the political landscape of the country is concerned. So this is another important opportunity for the Muslims in the country. Challenges, like any other place, we also have, as a country, as Muslims, there are quite a number of challenges, but most importantly, there's a challenge of education in the country. Although today the Muslims seem to have opened so many schools, but still the challenge of education still persists, because their schools are not up to the desired level. The standards of education in those schools are not that good, and this forces some of the parents to take their children and register them in various schools, which include the Christian schools. And the challenge is that although those schools are no longer restricting the Muslims or segregating them, but admission rights or admission preferences will always be given to their fellow Christians. So this is still a challenge that Muslims today face. But also there is a challenge of inadequacy of the scholarships in the country. Alhamdulillah, many Muslims now are able to send their children to school, but the challenge has been that of the school fees, because there are very few organizations that give or provide the scholarships in the country. So this is an important issue that the Muslim organization in the country need to work off, but also even the international community may also try to help the country in that regard. Another challenge is that of in the health sector. I think Muslims are not actively participating in the health sector. As a country today, there are only 22 clinics, operational clinics, Muslim-owned operational clinics in the country. And this is a less number compared to our colleagues, compared to the Christians who are running almost over 200 clinics, including the training colleges, nursing colleges, and also the hospitals. So that is the area, one of the areas that the Muslims are lacking in the country. Regarding the weaknesses of the Muslims in the country, I think an important weakness which the Muslims are facing, and of course this is not unique to Malawi, but also it applies to the different parts of the world, that is the Aqidah differences to do with the way they understand the Islamic text. And sometimes this creates problems and divisions among the Muslims. But overall, Alhamdulillah, the conditions have improved, unlike what it was in the past. Today, we are able to see different structures, different schools belonging to the Muslims. Although the clinics are less, but Alhamdulillah, they are there. However, there will always be a room for improvement, and we hope that Muslims can be able to work on their weaknesses and improve the conditions and grow from strength to strength, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Shuaib, Mzoma, for that very insightful presentation on Islam in Malawi. I think it was very comprehensive. Moving swiftly on to our next presentation. It's a joint presentation between Brother Shiraz Calu and Dr. Nabeelah Mussa from Mozambique. Shiraz Calu is based in Mozambique and serves as the executive head of leading cellular company Vodacom, its Mozambique operations. The presentation for Mozambique will be presented today by Dr. Nabeelah Mussa, who is a professor at the University of IRCICA in Mozambique. Over to you, Dr. Nabeelah Mussa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Nabeelah Mussa. Thank you so much for having us, me and Brother Shiraz. We are going to present the following topic. Our topic is Islam in Mozambique, a historical perspective on Islamic expansion from the pre-colonial era to the present. I would like to apologize about my English. It's a bit of a part English, but I hope you all understand. Let's begin with the origin, pre-colonial era. Islam's expansion in Mozambique has been visible for a long time. Historical data on Islam are a bit rare. However, archaeological evidence shows that even before the 18th century, the country's northern coast belonged to the Swahili world. Swahili world, we're talking Zanzibar, we are talking Tanzania. Zanzibar is an island in Tanzania and borders Mozambique. So is a Muslim world I refer here, definitely is connected to the Swahili world. And of course, we must mention Arab and Asian traders. They were huge agents of diffusion, transmitting teachings from the Quran already in the pre-colonial era. Trading was established in coastal regions as well, especially Sofala, Mozambique Island and Angosh Island, and a lot of sultanates were created in the north of the country. It is also important to consider that the expansion of Islam in northern Mozambique has received great influence from the Zanzibar Sultanate in the region. As we said before, the relationship with Zanzibar was fundamental, especially when it came to Islamic education. That's because political leaders used to send their children to Zanzibar to study in Islamic schools. In addition, some copies of a lot, indeed, of the copies of the Quran arrived through Zanzibar bookstores. If you talk about the name, the very name of Mozambique, we must say that it appears because a Muslim Arab name Mozambique, some would call Mussa bin Bik, Mussa ibn Bik, Mussa ibn Biki, was the first known ruler before the Portuguese invasion of the region during the 1550s and in the period before the colonial conquest of much of Africa. It is said that when making the first contact with Mozambican lands, the Portuguese called it Mussa ibn Bik lands in honor of its ruler, and years later, To simplify and to facilitate the pronunciation, the place came to be called only Mozambique. So that's how we have the name of Mozambique. Jumping to the colonial era, in colonial times, this expansion did not stop, of course, and Islamic religion was not associated with current doctrine. I mean, the Islamic as religion was never associated with the colonial times or the colonial, the Portuguese, I mean. In addition to the commercial route associations, many associations were created in this era, which further influenced the expansion of Islam. For instance, we have in 1934, to name a few, the Afro-Mohammedan Association of Lorenzo Marx was founded. Lorenzo Marx is now Maputo. In 1935, we have the Indian Mohammedan Community and the National Islam Association. They were founded, and until today they are very important indeed. In the north of the country, we have here we just have to show, we just want to show actually the diversity we have here in Mozambique, and the religious panorama was divided into two large groups, the Shadiliya and the Qadiriya. And in 1950, we have the Wahhabi current began to emerge, growing among Muslims of Asian origin. We don't intend to mention here that that there is a conflict between them, no, just to show the diversity we have here. The Portuguese government, of course, was not in favor of the spread of Islam because its true ally was the Catholic Church. And during the war against the colonialism, they even feared that Muslims could support Frelimo. Frelimo is the ruling party and the party that has independence, and try to captivate the Muslim world by rehabilitating mosques and visiting Islamic centers. Moving to the post-independence, we have that in the first years, the Frelimo government's orientation as Marxist-Leninist began to prohibit the teaching of the Quran, the pilgrimages to Mecca, and not tolerating sheikhs and madrasa teachers. Of course, Muslims revolted, the state gave in, creating in 1980 the Department of Religious Affairs to deal with all the religious organizations. As a consequence, in 1981, we have the Islamic Council of Mozambique. It was created with headquarters at the Untitled Islam facilities. And in 1983, some influential leaders, satisfied with the council, created the Islamic Congress of Mozambique. Continuing this competition, so fortunately, in 1983, the council started to enjoy contacts with the Islamic world and with the Libyan organization, and the Congress joined the World Federation and the World Muslim Congress. Again, it's not a visible conflict, just some internal disputes that we have here. In 1989, the government abandoned the Marxist ideal and gave total freedom to religious confessions, gaining international appreciation. Of course, when we allow diversity, you always will gain international appreciation. So normal. In 1994, Mozambique became an observer and effective member of the organization of the Islamic Conference, and in 1995, he joined the Islamic Development Bank, starting to establish diplomatic relations with several Muslim countries. Frelimo's new policy, of course, has put Islam back on the path of expansion, as we can see, and political affirmation. And analysis made, I think that this religion, this Islam religion that managed to withstand the adversity of the colonial time, and the Frelimo party in the time of Marxism-Leninism, has the strength to continue to grow in the multi-party framework despite the existence of internal divisions. I told you before, Congress and the Council thing. It should be noted that part of the population combines the Islamic religion with traditional knowledge and the Bantu culture here in Mozambique, as well as in all Africa. We can note it. It's very normal. And so there is a mixture between traditional Islamic knowledge and the traditional African knowledge, especially in the north of Mozambique. Moving to the present, in Mozambique, Muslims currently represent around 18% of the total population. And it's very notable the engagement of the Islamic community in humanitarian matters. I will emphasize the creation of associations for humanitarian aid, such as Islamic Medical Association in Mozambique, Islamic Community of Mozambique. I'm just going to name a few. We also have the Islamic Female Organization with the dissemination, and of course the dissemination of teaching in schools and so-called madrasas, creation of institutions to assist Muslims in religious matters, for instance, for the distribution of zakah, of sadaqah, Albani, and we also have the Halal Commission of Mozambique. We also have a lot of participation in the country's political life, where there are Muslim representations in parliament and in the government. And we are in our first steps towards the introduction of Islamic banking in the country. We had university training back in 2015, back in 2016. Bank of Mozambique is also having some trainings and workshops. And we had a conference here in 2015. I organized it actually on behalf of ICIM in 2015. It was a good one. And this was basically the timeline I would like to present here. But I also brought some topics that can be explored regarding Islam in Mozambique, just for us to have some topics to discuss for the conference, and maybe I will be writing about a few, I hope, hopefully. We have the evolution of the use of hijab in educational institutions in Mozambique. This is a special one for me. I would like to write about this one. It's not only going to be a timeline, but it's also going to be, I'm going to tackle the legislation and the law. We have the impact of humanitarian aid by the Islamic community in Mozambique under COVID-19. COVID-19 is the talk of the town, I must say. And COVID-19 is the 2020 huge matter we have, and of course we have to write about it. And we also had a lot of impact of humanitarian aid by so many Islamic associations, so it worth the risk of writing about it. Analysis of the coexistence of formal education and Islamic education in primary schools in Mozambique. The impact of the Islamic community on the economy of Mozambique. We have so many wealthy Muslim families here. We have a lot of Muslim entrepreneurs here. So yeah, the impact of the Islamic community on the economy must be noted. It's worthwhile writing about it. And we have the analysis of the influence of the Muslim community in the introduction of the halal concept in the restaurant and food industry in Mozambique. This one is a good one. This is a special one. Indeed, I would actually like to write about this one, because we have a huge influence of Muslim customers and clients in coffee shops and restaurants, and so to force them to have this halal concept there. So yeah, I think this would be a good topic to write about. So this is it for now. Jazakallah for having me, and I am going to finish here. Thank you.
We say thank you very much to Professor Dr. Nabeelah Mussa for that presentation. Because of our time constraints, we're going to move and collapse the Q&A session into the respondents and way forward sessions. And there have been many questions that have been asked and posed on this particular chat, on the Zoom chat forum of this particular webinar. What you will endeavor to do is we'll compile the list of questions that have been asked. We'll try to get the panelists also to summarize that. And in the post conference or post webinar email, we will send you the list of questions as well as the individual responses to those particular questions. Moving swiftly forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce our respondents who will be joining our panelists in answering the questions to this particular webinar. We've got online Ebrahim Patel, who is the Director of Minara Business Chamber. He's also the Honorary Consul General of South Africa to Indonesia. We've got a veteran journalist, Brother Shafiq Morton, who is South African journalist and has written extensively on the culture and historical context of Muslims in South Africa. We've got Professor Dango, who is a professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and then also Professor Shaida Kasim as well. So in my questions that have been posed, and I think I'm going to direct this to Brother Ebrahim Patel as just to kick off this particular discussion, and then you can use this question also to elaborate on your observations and way forward on this webinar. Firstly, can we create a think tank of professionals in every relevant discipline and ordinary people, so we have solutions that are not only top-down, and in so doing devise real solutions to the grassroots problems that we face? This is a question that was posed by Samina Amin. Ebrahim Patel, if you could respond to that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran, Mickaeel. Firstly, let me commend both Awqaf and IRCICA on a wonderful discussion on the Saturday morning that has stimulated many of us into thoughts and questions. A short answer to your very profound question is why not? This is something that we have been trying to propose and try to get together people from all different works, from all professions. Islam is about collaboration. The new world, the new technology talks about collaboration effects, and Islam has been doing this for 1400 years. So why can we not collaborate with all our different professionals in different spheres? But before that, I'd like to suggest that we support those professionals in their professional growth, support them in their academic growth, support them in their career growth, so that they give back to the community. And then we harness those professionals wherever they are, whether they are in the fields of commerce, in legal, in finance. All of us bring in the efforts together. And Minara has created the wonderful platform where we've brought businesses from across the country, we've brought professionals from across the country to discuss collaborative opportunities and how we can grow the community. So in a nutshell, in a short answer, because of your time, yes, and it is important for us to create this professional body.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I think that was very aptly handled. The next question is from the Member of Parliament and leader of the Muslim Party in South Africa, Brother Hanif Hendricks. He asks a question, and I'm going to pose this question to Professor Dango. He says, world Muslim leaders, including Supreme Leader of Iran, has called for a new Muslim civilization. Is the promotion of a new Muslim civilization a pipe dream? And our view is that African thought leaders must lead this charge. Professor Dango?
Well, the answer is it's a very difficult situation. As we know, the Muslim world is so divided. We have 57 countries, and we have a variety of ideologies, ranging from aspects of socialism to capitalism, and of course some forms of Islamism. And the Muslim world is so divided. I mean, even the organizations, the international organizations, when they come together, they find it so difficult even to come to some type of consensus on national, international issues. So while it's an ideal, of course, as same as some people want the re-establishment of Khilafat, it's an ideal that we can strive for, but I think in the present circumstances, it's a very, very difficult. Now maybe Iran and Turkey, and Malaysia, Pakistan, I think these are important countries, and they could maybe present their version of civilization, and hopefully, I don't have much faith in Muslim leadership, to be honest, but maybe the communities in the various Muslim countries might be influenced and maybe work towards that ideal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Sulaiman Dango. I'm going to call on Professor Shaida Kasim just to give us your comments on the presentations that were presented earlier, and also a way forward as you see it, leading into the next conference.
Thank you very much. I think there were very interesting perspectives on Muslim civilization in South Africa, in Malawi and Mozambique. I think a lot more needs to be done to document the achievements in all of the various spheres of activity. I want to perhaps comment a little bit, leading on from what Ibrahim Patel said, that we have think tanks. Perhaps a precursor to the think tanks would be to set up communities of practice. which involves both documentation of research as well as practice in various kind of fields of life, and then start through that to get then, kind of leadership type material that would become a think tank, eventually a think tank. So I think a really good starting point would be to get people of similar interests in particular areas to develop communities of practice, to encourage research, as I think somebody pointed out, critical research and engaged scholarship in these areas before we can go on to kind of lead on to this big vision.
Thank you very much for that very concise and impactful response. I've got another question that has come through from Brother Ridwan Kreinstein, and I'm going to direct this question to Shafiq Morton. A question is, how does the presence of so many Muslims from all over the world reshape the sense of native, I would like to broaden the question, Southern African Muslims? How does this presence reshape existing Muslim institutions to reflect a greater cosmopolitanism? How is the presence reframing how native Muslims see themselves and their agency outside their communities, let alone the country and the continent and the world? Shafiq Morton.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, indeed, Mickaeel and Ridwan, this is a very good question. And it's in fact something that I was going to bring up. The background to the question is the fact that in the Western Cape, at least, there are something like 195 different streams of DNA leading into the Cape Muslim community, the Afro-Cape Muslim community. What has been happening recently since 1994 is we've had individuals from about 20 different countries of Muslim identity coming here as refugees and immigrants. Some of these communities, for example, like the Somali community, have managed to establish themselves. At the moment, they are still fairly insular, but that is not going to last. And what I've been predicting for some time is that when the children of these people go to schools, they are going to want to marry our children and our grandchildren. So what is going to happen in the Cape, at least, is we are going to see an injection of about 20 more different DNAs into what is probably the most cosmopolitan community on the face of this earth, being the so-called Tavern of the Seas. This, of course, will filter into other parts of South Africa. But I think in saying this and in trying to answer that very challenging question is that we have to seriously start now researching, understanding, and reaching out to these communities, because many of these people are actually South Africans. They are African. And as people who are sitting in places of comfort, it's our duty. It's our moral, ethical, religious duty to embrace these people and to bring them into our community, but not in a paternal sense, not in a patronizing sense, but in the prophetic, welcoming sense. I know I'm giving a lot of cliches, but it is a question that needs to be addressed sooner than later. The fact that all these refugee and immigrant communities in South Africa are part of us, and they are going to be part of us going into the future.
Thank you, Uncle Shafiq, for that. And I think what you're trying to say is that the man-made geographical boundaries are basically just geographical boundaries. The nature of our society, living in a globalized world, and also the historic migrant transitions of communities across the man-made borders is indicative of a new type of milieu that is going to be emerging in our region. Moving on quickly to another question, and I'm going to pose this to Brother Shiraz Calu from Mozambique. I think it's a very hard-hitting question, but it comes from Professor Muhammad Haroon, and we know professors always push the envelope when they ask these types of questions. Can our presenter comment on the so-called ISIS phenomenon in northern Mozambique?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, I can make a comment on that. As we are all aware, every time that petrol is discovered, something's happened. So this is happening in the north of Mozambique. We need to acknowledge. our government are working hard to try to control them and with the assist of partner countries. It's actually a worrying thing, but we all know that when resources are found, especially in Africa, always we have this kind of situations. We as a Muslim community, we are far from them. There's no relation or there's no backup from any Muslim leaders in the country. And I believe the society also understand that difference between the extremists in the north and the Muslim community. One of the big example, it was when we had the Cyclone Idai in the north region of center and north region of Mozambique. That was a strong appeal from Muslim community to assist the people affected. And it was a very good moment to show the difference between what is happening in the north and what actually Islam means and what actually the Muslim community stands for. It's a concern, obviously. It's happening in the country, but we believe it's been much politicized in the media and everything. We still can travel to the north. We still have communication with the north. So it's still not as is portrayed in the medias and everywhere else. I believe I have covered the question.
Thank you very much. We are rounding up our program now. We have the program that is being recorded on various streams. It will be emailed through to you, a copy of the recording and where to locate it on YouTube and other various programs and platforms on Facebook. I've mentioned that there have been quite a few questions that have come in. We will not be able to handle all of these questions. I'm going to ask three people to conclude. Ebrahim Patel firstly, then I'm going to hand over to Professor Senghore just to sum up the discussion, and then lastly to Brother Zainul Abidin Kaji, who is the CEO of Awqaf South Africa, to conclude the program for us. Ebrahim Patel.
Jazakallah, Mickaeel. Let me just leave a few thoughts in this very apt discussion that has taken place, and that pertains from a global economic perspective. Global power is no longer in the hands of military might and politics. It is in the hand of capital and technology. And if we are not controlling capital and technology, then we are nowhere to be seen in the global power. For me as an African, the opportunity lies in Africa with its 1.2 billion people, of which 446 million are Muslim. And how can we then translate into an economic bloc within the FTA, which has been proposed, of the 52 countries across Africa, which is a free trade agreement that will encompass northern, southern, eastern, and western Africa into a total, almost an EU perspective, where goods manufactured in South Africa can cross entire borders and be sold in the markets of Egypt, almost giving me a sense of Mussa Manzi's journey from Mali across to Egypt, where he changed the economies of every country that he passed through. Can we not in the future create such a might within the Muslim community that we translate the entire economy of Africa, and we are seen as being the central pillar of that chain? Now, with those thoughts, those are the suggestions that I would make, is that how do we then create the research that is required? Because one of the biggest problems that we have is we don't know what we control in our economy. It is suggested that as the Muslims in South Africa, we have almost 50 billion rands in Islamic assets, and we make up about 10% of the GDP of the country, yet we don't have the statistics of what we really control and how we can use that influence to change and lobby government policies in our country. So if we translate that across the entire African continent, imagine the change that we can bring along.
Thank you for that, Ebrahim. I think you've excited all of us to take this particular discussion forward. Professor Aboubacar, Senghore, if you would like to just share some closing comments for us before we hand over to Zainul Abidin.
Thank you very much, Mickaeel, and thank you very much for all the panelists and speakers. We definitely have learned a lot from your different interventions from Mozambique to Malawi, and to the influence and the important role that the Muslim community in South Africa are playing. My comments are not going to be that long. The one will be on this concept of new Muslim civilization. I just want to say that there's nothing like new Muslim civilization. It might be the question of reconnecting from where we left it, or from where we dropped it. Because the same principles, the same values, the same teachings, Al-Quran, Al-Karim, and whatever the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ There is nothing in Islam, there is no teaching of Islam in any of the Islamic sciences which is old or which is outdated. You may have to reinterpret some of the principles given the context that we are going through. But nothing of the teachings of Islam is outdated. So it will be a question of Muslims coming together again if they're committed, because the issues that divided us are alien to us. Dr. Danga Ibrahim mentioned the challenges of our divisions of issues like communism, socialism, or socialism, capitalism, and communism, and those ideas. But those are alien to us. For us Muslims, as an ummah, anything that divides us is alien to us. The internal issues that are among us, the mazahib, schools of jurisprudence, they have been here. The different schools of tasawwuf have been here. All those internal issues that Muslims differ over have been here during the past 14th century of Islam. And the good example is that of the period of Ottoman rule, who ruled the Islamic world for a period of 600 years on the central administration, with orders and directives coming out of Istanbul. So in other words, when the different cultures penetrated our land, and then different alien concepts penetrated our way of thinking and way of doing things, then we've become deeply divided. And I always give the example of the Senegal region. I come from the Gambia. Senegal and the Gambia, for instance, is a good example. We share everything in common. The percentage of Islam and Muslims, the school of thought, the Sufi tariqas, everything is common. The languages, everything is the same except the colonial legacies. And because of the colonial legacies, we always look ahead with each other or against each other. So this is very unfortunate. So in other words, there's nothing like Muslim or Muslim civilization. It's a question of coming back to reconnect from where it was dropped and continue the teachings of Islam. And the last speakers raised a very important issue. That is how best that Muslims can come together, African Muslims, Afro-Muslims, under the FTA arrangement. I was very impressed when I heard the figure of Muslims within the context of African population. We are almost half. How we can come together to pool our resources together, to organize ourselves in a way so that we can create, at least if not a common market among Muslims, but we can create a situation where, like once the one-time Prime Minister of Turkey had it, the late Najimuddin Erbakan, when he dreamt the idea of creating an Islamic common market, the developing aid, the thinking was to bring the Islamic countries, the major actors particularly, and their resources together for them to create a common market so that they can pool their resources together and share whatever they have among themselves. And this would have gone to a large extent in addressing the issues of poverty, malnutrition, diseases, and other problems that we are suffering in the African continent. But unfortunately, we are still divided over issues that do not necessarily concern us as Muslims, as an ummah. So on that note, and on behalf of the Director General of IRCICA, Professor Dr. Halit, Eren, and the entire staff of IRCICA, we are saying a big thank you to Awqaf under the distinguished coordination of Ustaz Dr. Zain Abidin Kaji, and of course the chairman, the CEO, deputy CEO, the moderators, every one of them included, our friends in Malawi, our friends in Mozambique. And I think we'll have to come together again. We thank you very much for being with us, and your presentations have given us definitely a new direction as to what the way forward will be from today, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Professor Senghore. I think that you encapsulated a very comprehensive conclusion, and I think, but with those few words, thank you very much, Professor Senghore. I think you've summed it up perfectly. And please watch this space. We will be communicating further the responses of your questions and also any follow-up on these particular webinars in leading up to the conference to take place in Mozambique. Thank you very much for your indulgence and your time. to IRCICA, thank you for partnering with us, and also to all the panel presenters, the ambassadors that have joined us, and also the respondents. Your inputs have been invaluable, and inshallah we'll be able to ensure that through our collective efforts, a new form of relevant Islam, an Islam that is relevant to its community, but also to the broader Southern African society, will emerge from your very positive feedbacks and discussions. So with that, we'd like to thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.